The objective is always the wine, 100%. Everything that we do, it starts at the wine and ends with the wine. Everything else is decoration or gravy or whatever you want to call it. But if the wine's not any good, there's no reason to show up. And we do everything we can to make the wine as best that we possibly can. I'm Anthony Kirk, known by Tony. I'm the owner of Birdstone Winery. Have been for going on about 25 years. Lived in Madera pretty much all my life, lived in other places during college and work, but moved back many, many years ago, about 30 years ago. Bought this property with the idea of opening a winery. It was a wheat field that I purchased through a probate auction. Realized what an opportunity it was and took advantage of it. Paid $950 an acre for it, so dumb luck. Typically on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday when we're open, people will come in, and so the wines that we're going to have available are always going to be back behind the bar. And we have a variety, so we've got different brands that we produce, K-House, Birdstone. We've got some older Jackson Del Grillo wines that we produce. So there's a gentleman by the name of Ed Laquashi, and he introduced me to wine, something that I really hadn't had much exposure to. Ed introduced me to just a different lifestyle of wine and really good food, Armenian and Italian food from the area. And that exposure really triggered a lot in me as to learn how to cook, understand wine, go through the process. Once I went to college for it, went to Fresno State, went to UC Davis, it really became more of a passion. It never was a hobby. It was always with the idea of opening my own winery at some point. Ed was very analytical about wine. They had a group called Cellar Masters. They would do blind tasting, and they would do varietal tasting, and they would analyze the wine. They would score the wine. So it was beyond just the consumption of wine or the enjoyment of wine with dinner. It was an actual understanding of wine, how it was made, the different effects the heat has, the weather has, the winemaking process, the different types of grapes. So it was a amateurish but very in-depth look at wine and why it is what it is and why it tastes the way it does. And then there were other people that influenced me along the way. Brad Clark, who had a winery here for a period of time in Madera. The Schaefers, Peter Ficklin, Ray Krause. Ray is and has a great deal of knowledge in the wine industry from a variety of standpoints, and so not just the winemaking standpoint, but also the marketing. Ray is, in my estimation, a purist and looks at wine extremely analytically, and I learn something every time I talk to the man. I don't care if it is just for pleasure, I'll learn something from him because he has just constant little gold nuggets of information and perspective. So everyone's palate changes over time. There's an interesting wine competition in that they actually photographed the tongues of the of the judges, and they counted the number of taste bud receptors per square centimeter. And they broke those judges down into 3 groups: ultra-sensitive, sensitive, and standard. And what they determined was that the ultra-sensitive were about 80% women, 20% men, and the standard was the opposite. So what that means is that men's tongues generally have fewer taste buds, and over time those taste buds die. So just from a palate standpoint, when you're younger, you tend to like sweeter wines, lighter wines, fruitier wines, but as you age, not only does your palate change and your preferences change, but your actual physical tongue changes in the sense of what it's going to pick up. So as you age, men tend to have a need for more impactful wine, something with more acid, something with more tannin, something with more flavor, something with more oomph to it, and body and character, all of those things. And so I don't think I'm any different in that I need those more impactful wines and enjoy, but I can enjoy any well-made wine. There is a level of sophistication that everyone's palate goes through, increased sophistication. Being in the wine industry, I spent a lot of time with my nose in a glass, trying to determine what is happening with the wine. Whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, I want to be able to decipher what's happening, and more of that happens really through my nose than it does through my taste buds. I do wine taste a bit different than anyone else. If I go into a region that maybe is well known for a particular variety, Zinfandel, Syrah, Cab, whatever, that's all I will taste throughout the day. I'm going to be that odd duck that just simply stays with one throughout the day, because I'm going to try to pick up the nuanced differences between the individual wineries. You can take the same batch of grapes, the same box of grapes, and you can hand it to 10 different winemakers, and you can get 10 slightly different wines out of that. And the winemaking is 1,000 decisions, and each one of those decisions does impact the outcome of that final wine. And that's really what I'm looking for, is if grapes in a region are of a particular type, I want to know the differences of what the winemaker brings to the table. And that's honestly came from a winemaking course that I had at Fresno State. It's just understanding those 5 key elements of wine tasting, and just putting those to practice. I put kind of a mark on the wall of 100 wineries that I wanted to visit, not only the tasting room, but I also wanted to be, if I had access, I wanted to go into the winemaking area. Not every winery is going to let you do that, but surprisingly a lot will. If you ask the appropriate questions and show the respect to the people that are working there and understand the safety that you've got to, I call it wine porn, because for me it's where the foundation of what's happening with the wine comes from. And I'm going to look at the equipment, I'm going to look at the process, I'm going to look at the cleanliness of the space, I'm going to look at all of that. And I enjoy that a great deal. And then I'll taste the wine, and it usually is a comparative process. So in that, I went through 100 wineries, and I kind of did that multiple times at each and every one of those wineries. That was 1995-ish, 1996, 1997. 2001 rolls around, 9/11 happens, and I'm working for Hewlett-Packard and was up to my eyeballs with stress. That was the point in time where I finally made the decision, look, it's, do it now or it's never going to happen. The other thing that was happening is locally the Madera wine trail was taking off. And I knew some of the players that were in the wine industry and was seeing the successes of that. And I knew that if there was a good time to get into the industry, it would be then, because there was a built-in market that was being created, built-in customer base that was being catered to. And if I got into the industry, I would be welcomed into that group of people, and I could take advantage of that. The Madera Wine Trail did a ton for me, and I'm very thankful for those winemakers that had the vision in advance to see that that's what this region needed. So I need to have a few of the wine varieties that people are going to recognize: Cab, Merlot, Syrah, Zinfandel, Chardonnay. But those grapes grow well in this region, but they're not awesome in this region. But there are grapes that do grow extremely well in this region. Quinta Madera, port variety, and that information came from Peter Ficklin. The Tempranillo, another variety that sometimes is made into port. Heat does affect the wines, both good and bad, but we have to work around that and try to produce wines that either through the grape variety or through blending is going to be a good, marketable, enjoyable wine. I haven't entered a wine competition in probably 6-7 years. For a period of time we did it quite often. We would do 4 or 5 a year. A wine competition, you're judged against a standard that usually is a UC Davis-based standard 20-point system. You're not competing against other wines per se, you're competing against a standard. So if they had 50 Cabernet Sauvignons, each wine is going to be judged against that standard. Color, flavor, taste, finish, all of those things come into play, and they score based on that. So you could have 50 gold medals if they're all really good wines, or you could have 10 that are gold medals. So the most notable competitions are going to be California State Fair. That's probably the biggest. Orange County is big, San Diego is big. This region is very capable, and every winery that's here has entered in competitions and has done well. The wine varieties that I have on site are Cab, Dolcetto, Tempranillo, Alicante, Tinta Madera, Pinot Noir. Well, I basically was talking about a wine that, specifically Alicante Bouschet, which is such a well-balanced grape for this area. It grows extremely well in this environment. It is a hot environment. It can reduce the acids, but the Alicante as a grape variety is extremely well balanced. And so it's one of those grapes that is very, from a winemaker standpoint, is a very easy wine to make because there's very little that we have to do. It's a complete grape. Yeah, Montepulciano is a wine that we had made, and it's a very rustic grape. It's one of those wines that produces, I would call it jug wine, but we had made a wine and produced about 3 barrels, a little over 3 barrels, and it just was horrible. It just didn't turn out very good. We went ahead and bottled it, and we kept it, and we just didn't know what to do with it. And about 3-4 years later, the gentleman that I had that was helping me here, Matt Naiman, went back and grabbed some of it, and I said, look, we just need to dump it. We need to make space for it. It's not going to get any better. I had given up on it. And then Matt was like, you don't even want to taste it? Yeah, sure, go grab a bottle. And we opened it up, and it was fantastic. And what that taught me, and it was a very important lesson, is that the wine itself can correct itself if it's allowed enough time to do so. There used to be an advertisement, I don't remember the company, but it was no wine before its time was the comment that was made in the advertisement. And it's so true that a wine does need to have its ability to chemically balance and alter itself to the extreme. Again, being a live product, it's constantly changing, it's constantly being influenced by temperature and heat and movement and all of these different types of things, and sometimes you just need to leave it alone and let it be the best it can be. And that goes back to that, sometimes the wine's a better winemaker than the winemaker, because as a winemaker, even though we objectively want to do as little as possible to the wine, we're constantly doing something because we think so highly of ourselves that we can do a better job. And sometimes it's best to just let it be. So the first wine that we'll taste will be the Chardonnay. So in the Central Valley, the Chardonnays tend to be light. They will have a very distinctive flavor to them, crisp. We can do a buttery Chardonnay, but typically we don't. Diacetyl, which is one of the chemicals that produces that buttery flavor and aroma, doesn't really produce itself in high amounts in this region. So we tend to like to make more crisp, drinkable, what I would call California Kool-Aid. It's actually going to be a very desirable summertime wine. The next wine is going to be the Barbera. Now, Barbera is part of what I would call the three sisters. You've got Cabernet, Merlot, and Barbera. These are wines that are going to be medium-bodied. In this region, I think they produce a very soft and subtle wine, very drinkable, very much a food wine. I personally love it with a good acidic pasta, something that's got a true tomato base. The next is going to be the Alicante Bouschet. Now, Alicante is a very different kind of grape. Traditionally, most red wine grapes, if you slice them inside, the meat is actually clear. It's going to be translucent yellow or translucent green, but the color is in the skin itself. Where Alicante Bouschet, when you slice it, it's red meat on red skin. So it's a deeper, darker, richer, and it has that same flavor that comes across. Again, this area, it was, for the longest time, it was a blender, but Angelo Papagni produced it and made just a fantastic wine out of it. And I'm lucky enough to have access to a few remaining sections of some of those original fields. Final is going to be the port, and I have to give my thanks to Peter Ficklin. He was gracious enough to kind of turn me on to the process. And so I make one port and only one port. It's typically going to be a tawny with a little bit of color brought back into it. This particular one is a 14-year-old, unfiltered. We do rack it, but The thing about port is to leave it in the barrel as long as you can, and that's what has been done here.